this is the reason why you should buy. And we're not asking the most important question, the reason why it was important for them, in their heart of hearts. Like, that's a sale. Then we're going to see results, the mindset, going into every opportunity, saying to yourself, I would love to have the business, but I don't need the business. When they talk about building their organization just through referral, that means they're missing it. The internet almost shut down because they're like, are you blind? Do you not know what's going on out there? Do you not see what's happening?
You just hit 250,000 cold calls. Congratulations. Welcome to the Pipe Podcast. I'm your host, Crispin Cruz. I'm here with my friend and also I'm so excited to have him on today, my friend Todd Huff. Thank you, Todd, for coming on today. It's just great to have you here.
Crispin, it's good to be here, man. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So just a refresher for those that are listening or watching, we talk about sales process, we talk about sales initiatives, prospecting and experiences. And every once in a while, we get just a unique guest on, like Todd Huff. And, Todd, you start from humble beginnings. There are some humble beginnings here. And, I think there's a lot of lessons that entrepreneurs and people that are starting their own businesses and what it kind of takes, to get there. But before we get going, let me just ask you a quick question. I mean, what part of the world do you run, Todd? Just give our listeners and our audience just a little background on yourself as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, again, thanks for having us. And we have a daily talk radio show on in 5 cities in America. And we're on an online station. We reach about 150,000 weekly listeners. Indianapolis is home base for us. Knoxville, we're on there. Denver, Dallas, Salt Lake City, and we're talk. We do kind of the intersection of culture, worldview, politics, religion. I'm a Christian conservative talk show host, and that's what we do. We talk about issues that are facing this country each and every day, and there is never a shortage of things to talk about. I can tell you that.
That's true. And now you hit a lot of hot buttons there. You talked about talk show. You talked about being a Christian conservative. There's a lot of hot buttons there, Todd. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're not only probably gathering a bunch of listeners and serving up to a specific or type of audience. But it's not unlike when we're out there selling a product or service. I mean, you're going to have a market that you serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, have you had challenges in that area? Have there been like some speed bumps, some roadblocks? I mean, what has that been like?
Well, as you know, I'll say this. I do believe I was raised in my dad's a Union Democrat, and we were raised with, I would say, traditional American values. And I like to say on the show that 80%, I really believe this, Crispin, 80% of this country agrees with 80% of what we say. And of course, if they don't, they absolutely should. But the truth is that, we're talking about things that have been historically, I guess something that the vast majority of Americans of all backgrounds would have agreed with. Just fundamental truths about just building this nation upon liberty. The rights to be able that rights come from God and not from our government and so forth. And I think that most people agree with these things. And as you can see from the eagle back behind me here, that's our logo. You can't really see the tagline, but our tagline is conservative, not bitter. So I'm not a screamer. I don't hate you if you disagree with me. In fact, this might come as a shock to many people, but I really feel deep down that I'm a peacemaker. I'm not here to stir the pot. I'm here to get to truth. I'm here to flush out some of these ideas, to make the debate about the debate again, not about the politics of personal destruction and personalities and all this kind of thing. It's there's a lot going on there, a lot of moving parts, but we've certainly had people, if I say I'm a conservative Christian, there's a certain amount of people that are going to immediately not like me, and that's okay. I tell people that we'll get along so much as that's up to me. But the vast majority of people are interested, even if they don't agree. We can have dialogue and discourse, and keep it on a level where we're focusing on the ideas and the concepts, and not this personal stuff, man. It is just wicked out there today, but we get a little bit of it. I won't lie to you. It's not much though.
Right, right. Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I mean, it aligns a lot with when we're out there, trying to find new opportunities, when we're out there engaging with other businesses and trying to understand what's the compelling reason that they want to buy or utilize our service. And in your case, utilizing the service is tuning in, listening, right?
That's right.
And, we've had lots of conversations about this, Todd, but I'd like the listeners and viewers to hear part of this as well. We talk about selling advertising on the Todd Huff Show, right? And so that's a sales component of your show, that keeps things moving and keeps things rolling. And, obviously you've got some specialty advertisers, some large national advertisers as well. It's an interesting mix, right? But some of those conversations, and you've shared this with me, are, well, I'm not sure I want to advertise on a conservative, station. I'm not sure if I want to advertise on a, someone with a team or a group that pushes conservative Christian values, like things like that. So, and it's so funny because you talk about your listeners doing, nodding their head yes instead of no. Would you explain that a little bit to the listeners?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, and we do get it a lot. Well, I don't want to say a lot. It happens on occasion, where the people that we're speaking with, and I'll back up, and you alluded to this off the top, which forgive me, Crispin, I'm a talk show host, so you may have to smack me around and tell me to shut up. But I we started this in a closet. I literally started this. I used to say my wife's bedroom closet, but I realized people were wondering why we had separate bedrooms, but it was her bedroom or her closet in our shared bedroom. That's where I started this thing. And so we've had to do every piece of this business, right? Which includes a lot of things: content creation, sales, marketing, just, getting the word out, talking with folks. And sales is obviously the fuel that makes this run. And occasionally when we have these conversations, people do ask, hey man, I'm a little bit reluctant to be on a conservative talk show, talk to me about that. But the truth is, the people that tune in, and I tell them this because it's the truth, the people that tune in are nodding in agreement, right? They agree with what we're saying, probably not 100%, but darn close, Crispin, and they should be at 100%. But in all seriousness, they're nodding, and they also, the folks that listen, they're tired of this cancel culture kind of nonsense, to where I understand if a company is blatantly spitting in the values of an individual and they don't want to do business there. But if we're going to go through and go with a fine tooth comb and a microscope to say they donated to this candidate back in 2008 or something like that, we're really just furthering the divisions on our own. But most people are nodding when they're listening. They're not looking for reasons not to associate with the advertisers. They're actually looking for reasons to connect with the advertisers because they connect with what we're doing.
Right. And it's about the connection. Todd, we talk about that so much. I mean, even so much so when we talk, Sales Arbiter goes out and talks with organizations like yours and others, and we're saying, man, if you're out there trying to make a sale and you start that way, like if you start, your mindset is picking up the phone, I'm going in to meet with someone, I'm going to have this engagement with them, and I have to make a sale. I have to make a sale, right? It's the wrong mindset. Like it's the absolute wrong mindset. Go into every situation by trying to make a connection with your prospect, have a high level of engagement with them, right?
That's
To
right.
understand what makes them tick, and what their hot buttons are, and what they're interested in, and then see if there's a fit between your organization and theirs, and the services that you provide. And then if all of that happens,
Mhm.
then I mean the likelihood for sale then increases, right?
That's right.
Um, but you have to make such a unique connection with your listeners. Like, that's something that I have to believe that you strive for every day. And when you're working at trying to make a connection with your listeners, what does that look like in your world?
So the first thing is and this may seem really simple, or it's fundamentals, right? Fundamentals get us, I think, to where we need to be. A lot of times we think we've got to be extraordinary in the most extraordinary of senses. But I think if we do the fundamentals well repeatedly, that's where we get the traction. You earn the trust and so forth with folks. And I always start, this may sound really simplistic, but I start with respecting my audience. Like the folks that tune in are smart people, right? These are folks that are, I mean, they're educated. They care about what is going on in their communities, in their states, in their nation. And I have a deep respect for them. And I also, one of the things I also try to do is, there's segments within the listening audience. The vast majority of our listeners are 35 to 65. They're married with children, they own a home. But within that group, like there's a lot of like you could say avatars or types of people. Again, not to overly simplify it, but it helps me to talk to them, because I'll be honest with you, Crispin, the biggest adjustment when I was in that bedroom closet, when it was me and that digital microphone back in
Mhm.
2015, the biggest adjustment was learning how to talk into the microphone with no other external feedback.
Mm,
So, meaning there wasn't someone nodding or shaking
right.
their head or making a facial expression or the
Mhm.
uh-huh sort of thing. There's things that you teach, right? I mean, when you communicate. And so that was a tough adjustment. So you have to create that in your mind so that
Mm,
you can make it feel like you're talking to a human being and not like you're talking into a microphone in a closet. And that
mhm.
took me a bit to understand, because you just have to learn and develop that skill. In fact, I would say it took me 9 months of doing this every day to get to that point, to where I took that show to
Mm,
the local radio station. So, but that took time. But one of the things, again, I have a deep respect and admiration for the listener. But the other thing is, I try to envision them. I try to think about people that I know who listen that fall into these subcategories, and I envision myself, talking to them. How would I talk about this particular issue to someone who's, 35 with a couple of kids versus someone who's an empty nester who's, kind of seen the whole political show before, right?
yeah.
We're at different
Yeah.
points along the journey. And so I try to keep different folks in mind to communicate and connect with them um, in the ways that that's most helpful, I guess, to them to hear.
That's
So,
great. That's great. And so I want you to share this with our listeners too,
oh
Todd,
boy.
because of course, I know some of the backstories, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so when we're talking again, with sales arbiter, and we're talking with clients, we're saying prospecting is hard. Like, when you get out there and you have to cold call and you have to grow your business organically, if you think it's easy, it's not.
Mm-mm,
Right? It's
mm-mm.
hard. Like, that's the hardest way to build your business, is trying to build it organically and just talk with people that have never maybe thought about or utilized your product or service before. Okay.
Mhm,
So that's a given, right? And
mhm.
everybody that's listening or watching, they're like, okay, you're telling me something I already know. You're
That's
not
right.
giving me any value here. All right. So I'm going to toss it back over to Todd Huff, because here, what we talk about in sales a lot is timing. You know, timing is everything, right? And one day you might call someone and they're busy, they're running in 6 different directions, and they don't want to talk to you. They're short on the phone. Sometimes they hang up on you. Things happen, right? And you could call that same prospect a week later. 3 days later,
Mhm.
a month later, and they just happen to need your service. They just happen to need you know, what you're trying to sell, right? They need your company's services. So the way that I'm equating this is, you know, so you're doing this in your closet for like 9 months, right? And you get called in to like, and then all of a sudden it's like, I think it was 2020, the night of 2020,
2016. Yeah.
2016,
2016. Yeah, that's right.
right, 2016, that's right. So the night of 2016, and just tell the, you know, the listening and watching audience, like, tell them a little bit about what happened that night, and
Timing.
just
Yeah.
how all of these things, like all of the moons aligned, like things just fell into place all of a sudden.
They did. And and I had started the show as a podcast in 2015 and we did it for about almost a year now that I sit here and think about it. August 10th of 15 is when we started. And then in sometime in that next year, I started having conversations with the station in Indianapolis, which is home base for us now, which is Freedom 95 in Indianapolis. And just great guys there. Love them. But they were skeptical. In fact, I remember talking to them a couple of months before, and they were real dismissive of me. And you know, they probably had people calling them all the time.
Right.
But I reached back out and he said, yeah, we can have you start a time. And we started at 2 a.m. 2 a.m. is when we started in October 3rd of 2016. So it had been over a year of podcasting before we actually had gotten onto the actual radio. And so October 3rd of 2016, if your viewers and listeners here can go back in time, that's right. I mean, we're in the final stages of the Trump and Hillary race, right? The final month, basically. So a month, I forget if it was November. I want to say it was November 3rd. It might've been November 6th. I can't remember the date, but that first week of November was the election. And I asked the station, I said, hey, what do you think about me coming in and doing the show live on election night? Because they don't have any local hosts, really. They syndicate other national programs like Mark Levin and Glenn Beck and so forth. And so they liked the idea, but they said, hey, we can't completely give you the full time. You have to basically, during the commercial breaks, 3 to 4 minutes, you can give election updates. So I said, that's great. So I go into the studio, had a couple people there with me, looking into the numbers during the time, when we weren't on the air and so forth. And the first hour went just like that. It was fine. We would go in during the commercial breaks, provide updates and so forth. And then in the second hour, beginning of the second hour, Jeremy, who's the station manager, I think there, he kind of come into the studio and he kind of looked a little bit uncertain about what he was going to say next. And he looked at me and he said, my feed to whatever show he was playing at the time went down. And he said, this never happens. He said, how do you feel about taking the whole thing? And I sat there and I said, what do you mean the whole thing? Because I'm going in, remember, planning to talk for 3 or 4 minutes at a time, which is, I mean, you got to really be precise. Now he's saying to me, as I piece together, the whole time. So, opportunity presents itself and I couldn't say no. I said, sure, we can take the full hour. And he said, how much time do you need? And I'm just picturing dead air, right? As I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is for the station. So I said 30 seconds. So he walks out of the studio and I can see him walking behind the glass over here and I hear the music come in. I mean, it wasn't even 30 seconds. And Jeremy needs to know that it wasn't 30 seconds. It was like 15 seconds. Right. And then I had to go we ended up going for 3 more hours. And it was just one of those things at the end of the night that, he said that he just felt like that was meant to be. But again, just a month or two before, or even say 6 months before, he didn't want to have a conversation with us about being on the station. Right. So It is about timing it. Right. And the opportunity when it presents itself, especially in sales, you've got to be ready to and pull that trigger.
That's exactly right. And
people
don't. What's that?
Well, let me add this, and sorry, Crispin, but
go, please.
The other thing is I'll say, on the one hand, I had the confidence that I could do it. But on the other hand, if you were to ask me if I was 100% ready, I wasn't, right? I mean, but you have to know, hey, I've prepared myself for this opportunity and moment. Yeah, I might make a mistake here, but opportunity looks bigger um, going than coming sometimes. And I've got to jump in front of this thing and see what happens. And good things did happen from that. So it was a little intimidating, to be honest, because I wasn't ready for that, and it was live on election night, which is probably the busiest time of listening in the year. Right. So,
Right. Right. Wow. That is just great. I mean, it's a great story. And I mean, there's so many lessons there. It's just absolute gold. I hope our listeners are really, really tuning into that, taking some notes there. So, we talk about we talked a little bit about where you came from, what you're doing. What's next? What's next
oh
for
yeah.
Todd Huff and the Todd Huff Show? Like, what are you excited about? Where do you see yourself ending up this year, and kind of some long-term plans? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, and some of those include you, and that's you've been a big help to us so far, in kind of going from remember the guy in a closet to now we're on 5 stations, 150,000 weekly listeners, and so my wife and I, for context here, my wife and I actually decided to sell our house back in 2021. And
Mhm.
I'm actually in right now a toy hauler of a fifth wheel. You've seen this rolling billboard that's wrapped with our stuff, and we travel the country. We travel the country on what we call the Truth Tour. And again, not that I've got it all figured out, but I do say this: there are things that are true that we need to be saying, because we have a lot of lies that are being swallowed up out there that are just really causing havoc in people's lives and in our country and culture. But so we travel with the intent and the idea of just increasing brand awareness, drawing people to the show, and also to help with our syndication efforts. I mentioned that we're on 5 stations. We've been signed. We've partnered with or signed with a syndicator. He basically helps us get onto new markets. He's got 85 new markets for us
Hmm.
to go into. And they're the big ones. I mean, San Francisco, Houston, Chicago. I think New York City's on there, Los
Hmm.
Angeles. And so we plan on growing onto as many of those stations as we can. And pretty much we need an advertiser or two. It just uh, depends on the details, but to get on these stations.
Mhm.
And so that's where our partnership with you came along, because obviously as we're scaling, I mean, I can't do all this. So we've had to we have a team of 3 salespeople, and you've come in, I would say within a month or so. And there's
Mhm.
already been improvement. I mean, because I'm not a manager. I feel like I'm a good leader, but I don't know if it's the timing, too many things on my plate. I can't
Mhm.
manage it. And I don't always know how to teach them what I do in these meetings, because I don't know, maybe some of these things I don't even know that I'm doing, and some of it
Yeah.
helps that it's my name on the show, obviously. So anyway, so the plan is to grow and to syndicate nationally.
Mhm.
We've done a TV show in the past, even though I clearly have a face for radio. We've done a TV show, and I plan on, God willing, maybe looking at that again, and
Great.
continuing to get on more stations nationwide, grow the podcast, grow the brand, grow the reach, and just introduce people to these ideas through without the yelling, right? The conservative, not bitter brand and approach and style. And we can leave there without agreeing 100% and not hate each other. I mean, I feel like this
Right.
is so basic, but I
Yeah.
feel like it's a novel concept here in 2023. So
Right. Right. That's great. That's great. So let's go. Let's shift gears for a second, because you went through a lot to get to where you're at today. What would you recommend? Like, if someone's trying to start their own business, or they're trying to start their own podcast, if they're just saying, man, it's my time. I'm listening to Todd and Crispin this morning, and it's my time to go out and do my thing. What are 3 of the things that you would recommend, them to focus on if they're looking to launch their own thing?
sure. So great question, by the way. I think, you know, my wife and I'm the guy, we have to understand our strengths and weaknesses, right? So oftentimes our strength in the right setting is or the wrong setting is our weakness, because I'm a guy that's a guy of action. But I'll be honest, sometimes I'm the guy that's more likely to get the cart in front of the horse. And my wife's the opposite. She's like super methodical. You've met us. You sat across the table from us thinking, how do these two ever get on the same page? but I mean, there's the positive of both of that, but there's also the negative side. And so I would say, get your ducks in a row. I had to learn. I didn't know anything. In fact, before this show, we had some audio problems. It's by the grace of God and by your partner there. I can't remember his name, that we even have the audio going. I'm not this isn't my forte, but I learned enough to figure out how to do it. And once you have enough, I would just say, go, just take the next step. I know it sounds so simplistic, but I mean, I had to call the station, right? And I had to have him tell me that basically he didn't want to have my show on the radio or whatever. And now we're good friends, and now we're, in these other markets, and now, people come to us for things when they didn't, obviously, at the beginning. So I would say to move forward. I would also say, and I know that, this is in your wheelhouse, and I'm not just saying it because it's in your wheelhouse, but I love the quote from Mark Cuban when he says sales cures all. And that's maybe overly simplistic, but the truth is, if you have something that you can monetize, that revenue can help you solve the problem. Too many people wait until it's a perfect scenario, and they sit there and they come up with all these plans and strategies, and they set them on the shelf. And I think if you have an average plan and you go out and market it and sell it, you will outperform people who have an extraordinary show. Like I even think for what we do, look, I know that there's egos involved or whatever, but I don't ever think that this show, how do I say this? I don't try to make this show like the most profound or the best. I get on there and I do what I think I'm gifted to do, right? I don't try to be someone else. In fact, the syndicator, who I've got a good and an interesting relationship with, he asked me when he first talked to me, he goes, I'm looking for the next Rush Limbaugh. Are you the next Rush Limbaugh? And I said, no. I said, I'm not. And he said something like, well, I guess we should just pack it in and call it a day then. And I said, hold on, let me finish that thought. I said, I'm not the next Rush Limbaugh. There's only one Rush Limbaugh. I said, but if you're asking me if we can be immensely successful, I think that we can. And that's a different question. But you have to move forward. You have to do it the way that you're convicted to do it, one step in front of the other. Get out there, be uncomfortable. You have to live in discomfort, right? You have to. And I would just say, if it's something that you really feel compelled to do, and I hesitate because you can't just wake up on a Monday morning and by lunchtime think that this is the path, but because this is something that I felt called to do since 1999, right? So there's a long history of this for me, right? So it can't just be instantaneous in the moment, but I do think once you have clarity and once you have a little information, you just got to go. You just have to cut the podcast, do the video. You're not going to be happy with it, even if you wait 6 months. I used to edit I used to go back and listen when I started, and I edited out every and in my program. And that's stupid. There's no point in that. And it wasted time, but it was just that process. That's how I got, I guess, comfortable. I don't know. Or maybe it taught me, hey, you say this an awful lot, so stop doing it. But it's going out and actually taking the steps and not being afraid to fail.
Yep. And getting out of your comfort zone. And again, we talk about that so often in sales. Get out of your comfort zone. If something's not working, try something different. And it's so easy to say, and it's hard to do. And the reason that it's hard to do is because, most salespeople, not all, but most salespeople, and maybe even most people, they have been so devalued in their role performance. Their role performance has impacted their identity, like who they are. And when role and identity come together, it's dangerous. That's a dangerous combination because you're letting your role performance impact your identity. And then that's making it turns you, the alls that does is just stirs the pot of negativity, right?
Mhm.
And so we have to keep those two things separate, right? Your role is your role, and your identity is who you are, the experiences that you've had in your life, all of those things, right? That's different. So you keep those two things separate, and you don't let your role performance impact who you are in your heart of heart. You don't let that
Mhm.
happen, right? And so that's what I love about sales. One of the things I love about sales is when I pick up the phone, Todd, I can be anybody who I
Mm.
want. I can be anybody that I want to be, right? And that gives me the opportunity then to kind of understand the difference between role and identity. It gives me the opportunity to make it easier on myself to get out of my comfort zone,
Mhm.
right? And so then I can try different things and I can see what works. And then when you figure out something that works, then use it and explore it, right? And have fun with it. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I end every podcast, that I end, I say, keep selling and have fun doing it, right? Because it's supposed to be fun. And if it's not fun, then I
Mhm.
gotta tell you, I mean, it's summer now. I mean, there's probably still some lifeguard jobs out there, right?
That's right.
I mean, you
That's
then get
right.
out of it, right? Do what you love, because when you do what you love, then it doesn't feel like work. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get tired. It doesn't mean that you don't have to be emotionally strong. It doesn't mean that you don't have an ironclad work ethic, right?
Mhm.
Because those are the people that succeed in life, right? Is that they apply those gifts, you know, from the guy upstairs. I
Mhm.
believe too. I believe too. I was called to this as well. I believe I was called to help others and grow in ways that they never thought they could.
Mhm.
Like, that's what gets me going, right? And so those are the things that we learn. Like, those are the lessons that we learn. But man, sometimes you got to fall off the bike more than just a few times, dust yourself off to get back on. Right. And I'm sure that's
Absolutely.
happened to you in your life as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a continual process. I don't know who said it, but I remember the words, "Failure is an event, not a person." Right? It's an event. It's something that happened. It's not. It doesn't define you. It doesn't define, you know, who you are, and it's a temporary problem. It could be a big. I understand that there could be a lot riding on it, but it's just an opportunity to start again.
Mm.
And it's easy to say that, but if you really believe that, then, I tell the team, I tell my kids even, daddy, I got 3 kids. Dad fails a lot, and they see that a lot too. But dad fails a lot. But you know what? The truth is that's because we're doing, right? There's been things that we've done that did not go over right, right? And we had to change those. But if we would have not tried those things, I mean, you just get into the status quo kind of behavior, and you have to be willing and able to step out, understand that if I fail, it doesn't mean it's the end of life as I know it. It just means it wasn't the best way to do it, or maybe I'm not ready for that, or fill in the blank, right? So
Yep.
it
Yep.
is absolutely part of the journey, though.
That's great. That's great. All right. So let's just talk a little bit about this piece, which is so interesting because you're being pulled, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. You're being pulled in all kinds of different directions, and now you're having to delegate. You're having to do certain things so you can focus on the show. You've got a goal to be nationally syndicated, which we talked about as well. So there's a lot of work that's going to need to be done there. So how do you do it all? I mean, your father, husband, world kind of,
Mhm.
I say world traveler, but at least you're traveling from state to state and spreading, that messaging as well. How do you do it all, Todd?
Well, it's funny you put that right after the failure question because I'd be honest in saying I sometimes I don't do it very well, right? That's the truth. There's a lot of hats to wear and things to manage. Um, I think for me, the biggest key was learning to be vulnerable. I'm a perfectionist by nature, and it's tough for me. I'm not good at delegating. There's a part of me that says, I should do that. Why am I asking someone else to do that? It's something I can do. Just add it to my list of 2,400 things. And it's just, it's not, it doesn't come naturally to me. So, but being vulnerable and just like working through it and asking for help, those things were not easy for me. They're not. And to say, hey, I've bitten off more than I can chew here, or I need help in this particular area. And just trying to be as candid with both myself and with, my wife or the team or whatever. Because you can't do everything, right? You've got to get into your lane. And there's that part of the growth process where you say, hey, we just have to figure out and make this work as we get through this phase, but it can't be forever because, it gets pretty intense. It can get pretty intense for a long time. So, and I don't always succeed at that. I mean, to be candid with you. So, I for me, it's about trying to be candid and transparent with my wife and family and just saying, hey, for the next couple weeks, I'm going to be having to work later and then we'll do this or whatever, so that's really how I try to mitigate or to manage that, I guess.
That's great. That's great. It's great advice for anyone that's listening. So, all right, this is typically the time that we pivot to the Sales Arbiter 7. So this is not an original idea. I stole this from our friend James Lipton, God rest his soul. And he used to have a show called Inside the Actor Studio, and he would ask his guests, some questions like this at the end of the show. So I'm going to pitch them over to you and see what you think. And I've kind of adjusted these questions, but turned them into our own. And so I'm interested to see how you answer. And I know that our audience really enjoys it as well. So we'll start with the first one, which is, what is your favorite word, Todd? And I know you have a lot of them, but but what's your favorite word?
I would say that the first thing that came to mind when you asked me that was, for me, I would say it's faith right now. And that's because I think this journey, oh boy, it's a deep answer. I'll try to keep it short here, but
it's okay.
I think I'm maybe sometimes conflated the meanings of hope and faith. I'm always a hopeful guy. I'm an optimist. As Zig Ziglar used to say, I'm the guy that gets in the rowboat and goes after Moby Dick with the tartar sauce, right? But there's a difference between hope and faith. And I don't want to get preachy here, but you asked the question. This is my answer. I would say faith is, from a biblical or Christian perspective, is believing that there's a version of the Bible that says, I'm trying to think of exactly how it says it, but basically the idea is that it will come to pass if God speaks it. If God says X is going to happen, it cannot not happen. And to believe that with all of my being, as though you're saying the sun is going to rise tomorrow, like that means a lot to me. And as I've gone through this journey, especially feeling that I've been called to do this, there's been some gut-wrenching moments. I mean, there has been. And I'm reminded of those stories of Abraham, and I'm reminded of the stories of Moses in the Bible. And so I would say the word for me is faith, because it's really, in these recent months and years, I've learned what it means. I thought I knew what it meant before, but I don't think that I did. I think having this life experience has caused me to really understand the difference between faith and hope.
That's great. That's great. It's a great answer. All right, next one. What is your least favorite word?
Ooh. So a couple things come to mind, but you know what it is? This may shock you. The word fair. Now, fair, F-A-I-R.
Yep.
And I, not like the county fair, like the word.
Oh, because I was like, you don't like the balloon, like you don't like the
just have a thing against the.
I mean, what's wrong?
That's right. I have a problem with that. No, but when my kids come to me and they're like, "Dad, that's not fair," it goes through me. Now, I like the term justice, right? Everybody wants justice, but I think fair has this connotation where we just almost we say it from a whining perspective. Not always. I mean, context matters here, but I'm thinking of it when my kids will come to me and say, "Dad, that's not fair," because of course you want to say, "Well, life's not always fair," right? And so I don't like crying about those things. I do believe in justice, and I think we'll ultimately see that when all is said and done. But this concept that says fair, I think I don't like it because it usually comes from a position where we're basically whining about our circumstances. And I get it. I've said I've said it to God before in my prayers. God, this isn't fair. What are you doing to me? Oh, woe is me. But the truth is, like, I don't like it because it usually is spoken in that context out of a position of, I don't know, like victim mentality or, um, you know, just kind of feeling sorry for ourselves. I don't like it. I tell my kid this, that do not use the 4-letter F word. That's what I say. Yeah. So
I love it. I love it. That's great. Okay. What is something that could make your day?
something that could make my day. Um, you know, again, Crispin, I really try to, but the two greatest things on this, the two most important things on this planet are God and people. And to me, to be able to have relationships with both and to be able, to have the kids show me something that they made, or we had the opportunity, I won't go into it, but there's a girl, a neighbor of ours here where we're staying now that we basically had to help from a really dire circumstance here a couple of weeks ago, domestic violence even. And she went to church with us yesterday. And just those little things to me, those relational things where you can see healing and hope and love and just experience. It sounds cheesy. I used to run a boys and girls club. Maybe it's that cheesy side coming out of me. I don't know. But just those relationships, those little moments, those moments that the kids are trying to connect with mom and dad, or just show them what they've made or done, or those moments with my wife when we've walked through this valley sometimes, and you're parched and you're exhausted and you're broken down, and you have this victory. And you don't have to say anything to each other. You just your eyes well up with tears or something. To me, it's those types of moments that just light up my day.
That's great. That's great. What's something that could ruin your day, Todd?
Man, that's a tougher one for me.
Right? Because your
you
glass is half full. Even if there's like this much at the bottom, you're like, oh, my glass is half full.
Let me say this, and this is, I was blown away by this. I was a Youth of the Year judge for the Boys and Girls Club in Indiana one year. And basically they were picking the one kid to represent the state in the Youth of the Year competition nationally. And she was blind. She was blind. And so there were 4 judges. We all had to ask, we had like pre-written questions that we were basically assigned. And this one guy in my group, it wasn't me, he had to ask the question of all the candidates, have you ever had any adversity? I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, have you had any adversity to deal with? And he even hesitated to ask the question because he's like, man, this seems insensitive, right? I'm talking to this girl. She can't see. And I swear to you, the girl's response, I will never forget it. He asked her that question and she paused and she goes, And I mean, I'm literally going, like, are you like, you don't see that as a weakness, or you don't see that as adverse? I was blown away. And I think that there's a lesson there, man. I think, again, I'm not minimizing problems. I know we all have them. And they're real, and there's loss in life, and there's grief and despair. I know that. But man, a lot of times I think we look at it the wrong way. And that girl, so much, infinitely further than I would have been. I would have said, I'll tell you what my problem was with this, I can't see, right? And she didn't even think of it. I don't even think she gave an answer. But I would say what would ruin my day is to have just a loss of hope, a kick to just some negative news that just makes you kind of hit you in the stomach, takes the wind out of you when you just need those moments of hope.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What's a noise or sound that you love?
Singing. Good singing, not my singing.
Okay. Good singing. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just reminded of, again, we go to this little church here. There's like 40 people, and we're not usually on tune, but man, some of those old hymns that we sing, just man, it's a beautiful thing. And there's a hymnal written by a guy named Horatio Spafford, I believe, and it's a popular one. It is Well With My Soul. And the history of that story, the hymn, was that I believe he lost his wife and daughters on a ship that was crossing the Atlantic. I think it sank, and he lost his family, and he penned those words. And like, to me, it's the sound of the singing, especially when you know the background, especially when you can relate to, not that we can relate to that level of grief. Some people unfortunately can, but just when we can relate to a little piece of that, and then, the joyful noise that can still come from that. That's music to my ears, literally and figuratively, I guess. So
that's great. That's great. That's great. What noise or sound do you hate?
Oh man. I think of this as a parent. Oh boy. The hardest noise for me, I remember saying this when we had our kids were 13, 11, and 9. I remember telling my wife, I said, when God was creating a noise that he needed parents to tend to something, like he nailed it with the baby cry. Like he nailed that to a T, because you cannot not do something about that. Right.
Right.
I've seen research where men, maybe bad to say about, but men, when they hear a baby cry, they just like want it to stop. And a woman's response, again, there's always differences, but tradition, or just from the studies, show that they want to comfort. And so I just remember those years, man, those crying baby years. And man, that was tough on me. I mean, that really,
you just wanted it to stop.
Yeah, I did. I mean, that sounds bad, Chris, but I'm not gonna lie to you.
Please.
I just needed it. I just needed it to stop.
Yeah. I know. Oh, that's
but that's, and there's obviously the, why are they crying? What's going on behind it? But yeah, that's a noise that I'm not.
That too, but
I don't know if I'd say I hate it, but it's a noise that just really, just tough for me to deal with. So
that's great. All right, last one. What profession would you have liked to attempt other than your own?
Oh man. I think I would say, so when I graduated high school, I got accepted to West Point and to Annapolis, the Naval Academy, and I was medically disqualified for sleepwalking. And I went through, I got the congressional approvals and all that stuff. I actually spent the night at the Naval Academy. And I think that's what I would say, serving. I couldn't serve. Remember, that was around 2001, 9/11. So there was a long period of time as a young man when I actually felt almost like I didn't fulfill my duty by, joining that fight, whatever people think about that. But I did feel that way. Here we are dealing with this new issue, or this issue that's now in the homeland. And I think serving, if I went to the academy, I would have wanted to try to fly, or, the other thing I would have considered would maybe, try to go to the special forces or something, but just to serve, I think would have been, in the military, I think would have been the thing.
You always had an affection for that. That's interesting. Well, that's great. All right. How do they find you? How do they start dialing you up? How do they start listening to Todd Huff? What's the best way?
The best way is to go to the website, toddhuffshow.com, which I think I see back there behind us. And then we're on social media. I'll be honest. I mean, we have a director of marketing, Josh, who's we deal with a lot of the stuff in big tech, and I don't want to get into it, obviously for the time's sake, but it's hard. You don't find us unless you're looking for us, because we've been throttled. We've been not officially deplatformed, but we're on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and I think we're on Rumble now as well. But most of those platforms, our handle is Todd Huff Show.
No. Okay, good. Well, you're on LinkedIn and all of my channels today, so that's good too.
Well,
That's
and
good
then
too.
you can listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. I mean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever. I mean, there's so
Great.
many platforms today. Apple Podcasts.
Well, listen, catch a show. I know he's wildly entertaining. He's just and he's a wealth of knowledge. And I think that, your content and what you're doing is obviously resonating with a lot of people out there, Todd. And I'm just so glad that you were on today. And thank you for being part of the show this morning. And we'll have you on again sometime soon.
I appreciate that. And I want to say this too, to your folks that are watching. I mean, the way that you've helped our team in a short time, I mean, it's nothing short of, in my mind, profound. It really is. It's been a blessing to me. And I would tell the folks listening to listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. And he's really good at what he does. And, when I see our salespeople put into practice what you tell them, I see good things happen. It just happens. And they feel better about it when they do it right right way, because they're seeing the beginnings of the results start to trickle through as well. So
that's right.
You do a great job, and we're blessed to have you on our team as well.
Well, thank you so much. It's a very collaborative effort, but thank you for that, and I appreciate it. So I end every show like this, Todd. I end every show, and we've talked about it before, but listen, all of those listeners and viewers out there, keep selling and have fun doing it. Thank you so much. Thanks again for being on, Todd.
All right. Thanks a lot, Crispin.
All right. Bye-bye.
This is the reason why you should buy. And we're not asking the most important question, the reason why it was important for them, in their heart of hearts. Like, that's a sale. Then we're going to see results, the mindset. Going into every opportunity, saying to yourself, I would love to have the business, but I don't need the business. When they talk about building their organization just through referral,